welcome to All Steelers Talk, your home for everything Pittsburgh Steelers, presented by allsteelers.com. Hello, beautiful people of Steelers Nation. Thank you for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. Make sure to find us on youtube.com/All Steelers Talk. I'm your host, Noah Strackbine, joined every Friday by my main man, Derek, the Kid Bell. Derek, plenty of draft talk. We are less than 2 weeks away from the first round. The Steelers are now talking about trading up, maybe trading back, but we're going to talk some defense. It's a gorgeous day out here in the Berg. How you feeling, my friend?
Man, it has done nothing but rain over the past 2 weeks in Louisville. So it's actually really nice out today. So I am probably going to go outside and just run around with my daughter or something before it just starts pouring rain again, man. I've never seen so much rain in my life.
It's definitely rained here all week long. I'm trying to move. So I'm in the middle of a move, and every time it stops raining, I give my truck 45 minutes to dry off, and then I just put as much in there as possible, run it over, and then I'm running back, and by the time I'm coming back, it's pouring rain again. But today is nice. Yesterday was nice too. I think it snowed this morning though, so classic Pittsburgh weather. Jesus. All right, let's talk some NFL draft. The Pittsburgh Steelers, they're rumored to be trading up, trading back. We're done talking about it. Until a move happens, we are done addressing rumors of the Pittsburgh Steelers. But what we do want to talk about is the defense. You put out a tweet yesterday, I believe, last night, that said that you believe in the next year, the Steelers will have to address the pass rush in the NFL draft, free agency. I think you pretty much left that one open. I want your reasoning behind that, because I don't think a lot of people realize the situation that the Steelers are in when it comes to their defense.
Yeah, I mean, next year, I think that their pass rush and their defensive front could be really good, and it could be a strength. You still got obviously TJ Watt being the main guy, MVP, defensive player of the year type candidate. But you look at what Cam Hayward's doing right now at his age, he's kind of defying physics. He's still extremely productive. He's going to be 33 in a couple of days, I think. So you can't expect him to play at that level forever. And then, Stephon Tuitt, who knows if he's going to be in the fold next year or not. But even if he is, he's, an impending free agent. You just look around at their defensive linemen. They took Isaiah Loudermilk last year, but he's more of a run defender. Hasn't really ever showed any promise as a pass rusher. So you're looking at who's going to be that kind of sidekick to TJ Watt, moving forward, after Cam Hayward kind of, eventually is going to decline. I mean, nobody can play at that level that he is forever. So I don't know if they get necessarily that sidekick this year because of all their other needs. They still need a starting safety. They're probably going to take a quarterback. But next year, I do think that you could, if you're making an early prediction on where their round one pick could go, assuming they still have one and they don't trade it, I think a pass rusher could definitely be on the board there for sure.
We made it 3 minutes and 30 seconds into this podcast before you mentioned if they still have their first round pick. So
I'm just saying.
So what do you think? Alex Highsmith, I think, is the one that stood out there. I agree with you on the Stephon Tuitt. I've told you that I think even if Stephon Tuitt comes back, plays a full season and plays well, the Pittsburgh Steelers move on from him after this season. He's just hitting that age. He's never had a healthy career, missed last season. So it's tough to say that this is a piece that you build on. And Cam Hayward, Cam Hayward will stick around until he can't play anymore. But like you said, he's getting up there in age. Alex Highsmith, I think, is the big question mark. Do you think that Alex Highsmith is a dude that still has a potential future in Pittsburgh? Or, I don't think he's played his way out of Pittsburgh yet. But both ways. Both as in he's not playing well enough. I think he's playing fine. And I don't think he's playing himself into a big contract. So he fits right in that mold.
Yeah, I think Alex Highsmith is a really solid player. He's honestly the perfect type of player to play opposite TJ Watt. Given their current structure on defense, it's hard to pay two edge rushers, at the same time. And that's kind of another reason why I think next year there could be a priority placed on pass rushing because, Highsmith's going into year 3. We'll see if he takes a jump. I think Highsmith is close to being tapped out. I don't want to say that he can never be a double-digit sack guy. But I think Highsmith is going to be a consistent, like, 6 to 8, 6 to 9 sack guy with good pressure production, which is what he was last year. And that's great for the value that they have placed in him. I think you're going to need that second impact guy. And with Highsmith being with him being going on to the last year of his deal next year, the following year or whatever, there could definitely be an emphasis placed on, even if it's an edge rusher, you need, pass rushing. And that's going to be something that the Steelers covet, because that's just how they build their teams. They build it from, the front back, and they place a lot of emphasis on that, front seven. So
I agree with all that. I don't know how much digging you've done into next year's NFL draft yet. If I had to guess, at least enough to answer this question. Is it an edge class, like an edge rusher class, or is their best bet to find a defensive end?
I haven't looked. A lot of the defensive ends that honestly have popped on tape aren't going to be draft eligible next year either. I mean, there's obviously the guys like Will Anderson, but like the Steelers aren't going to be bad enough to take Anderson. He's going to be the first defensive player taken next year. There's another guy that I've been kind of intrigued by that I've gotten a lot of people that have sent me his stuff is Isaiah Foskey from Notre Dame. I watched him live. Yeah. I haven't studied him, but he's been really impressive when I've watched him live. I don't know where his draft stock's going to be, but he's a guy that I think you should keep an eye on. The Steelers, they're going to keep their eye on the Notre Dame program. Colbert was at the Pro Day this year. That's a frequent hot spot for them. So
Kyle Hamilton was in for a visit. Can't forget that one.
Yeah, so I think Isaiah Foskey may be a name to watch for next year in the draft as well.
So I agree with all that. I like the edge rusher. I think it's a part of the defense that's going to be crucial in the next year. I think that's obviously we could all agree, and I think anybody in the comments could agree as well. Like the Pittsburgh Steelers live and breathe off of their pass rush. Isaiah Loudermilk is another X factor here because he has some upside. They saw enough upside to come and trade for him and then play him during his rookie season. I think they hoped Carlos Davis also had some upside. I don't think he's shown that, nor has he stayed healthy, unfortunately. Does Isaiah Loudermilk have the potential to fill a role? Not necessarily be the guy, but fill a role.
Yeah, I think he has potential to play a role. I mean, he exceeded my expectations last year and what they asked him to do. And I think that he's going to be a pretty solid run defender. I thought that was really the one thing that he did really well at Wisconsin, but he's never really shown that pass rush potential. So you can have guys in your rotation up front, whether it be a defensive line or, on the edge, like that aren't great pass rushers, but you need impact players to rush the passer too. I mean, that's kind of how you combat these high octane offenses. If you're looking for other guys like on day 3, I mentioned this as a possibility too with Alu getting up there in age. I think he's 35 as well. Maybe they take a look at a guy like Neil Farrell from LSU. He's a 2-gapping nose tackle who can play the run. Again, another guy that really doesn't possess a ton of pass rush ability, but as far as like maybe being a replacement for Alu in the future, like if you're not sold on Carlos Davis, he could be a guy like that I've that's kind of caught my eye a little bit.
How much trouble is the Steelers defense in? Because you brought this up and it all seems very realistic that next year they have to fill at least one position, probably 2. Tyson Alu, I would not guess returns after this season. That's 2 prime spots. They don't have a true replacement. Like usually the Steelers have somebody like they had with Tyson that you could say, oh, well, he's a guy, he's a starter. He's just not starting. They don't have that guy. Is it possible to, because until right now, defensive tackle in any sense was not in my mock draft for the Steelers. Are they going to hit a road bump? Is this a possibility?
Yeah. I mean, I think it could be a level of concern next year. Again, like trying to predict needs like a year away is always difficult, but like we're really just talking about it because of like how the Steelers are built, and they want to be really strong in the trenches on defense. So it's important, and you look at the depth, and I think the depth looks really good for next year if you're assuming that Tuitt and Alu are going to be back. I think, it looks pretty solid from that perspective if everybody is able to stay healthy. But you've got to look at things for the future. Just given Cam's age, Tuitt's going to be a free agent after next season. So there's some cause for concern. But, I mean, I do think that Loudermilk has – I don't want to say, like, starter potential, like, in terms of – he's going to be like an Aaron Smith or somebody like that, but like, or even like Tuitt or anybody like that. But I think that he could be a guy that plays 60% of the 50-60% of the snaps, and he's a good run defender. But again, you're going to need to find that pass rushing elsewhere if that's your plan for that defensive end position.
All right. It's a concern. I think I'm a little more concerned or rattled, I would say, because you just brought this to my attention, and until an hour and a half ago, I was like, the Steelers are going to be fine. Defense is looking good. Let's answer some questions here in the chat. We'll start with a defensive one. This is you highlighted this a while back. I don't think we've ever really dug into what Brian Flores does to the Pittsburgh Steelers defense, but it's obviously significant, and I think you would understand it better than most.
Yeah. What's up, Jeff? By the way, Jeff's been a guy that I've talked to a lot on Twitter over the years. He's a cool dude. But I will say that as far as Flores, man, I think he's going to have an influence in the way that they create their pressure schemes. And I think that's honestly like by far the most intriguing thing about the addition for me specifically. Like he loves to get really multiple up front. You look at Miami, like some of the ways that they use their linebackers and their edge guys was really creative. A lot of stunts, a lot of guys standing up. It creates a lot of confusion from the offensive line in terms of like not knowing which way to slide the center, who's coming, who's not coming, those type of situations. So like you look at some of the guys that he's had in the past, like Kyle Van Noy, kind of the like hybrid edge type inside linebacker. I thought he got a lot out of Jerome Baker last year and the year before. He was a guy that I thought he really maximized his athleticism as a blitzer. They blitzed their inside linebackers a ton. And even a guy that just got paid, their edge rusher, what's his name? Agba, I think. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
He's another guy, like a lot of length, man. And he put him in so many good situations by getting him those one-on-ones on the edge just by creating pressure up the middle. So I think that's where you're going to see the most impact. I'm hoping that, they can create some mismatches up front. And the Steelers have all kinds of athletes, man, like Highsmith, Watt, even Cam Hayward, like we said, still playing at a high level to really exploit some of that stuff. And then a guy that may benefit from it is maybe a guy like Devin Bush, who hasn't really had the opportunity to blitz a lot here in Pittsburgh to date. Maybe that's how they kind of get him going and getting back on track. Is maybe just to get him playing more full speed and in the backfield instead of, trying to have him cover.
Yep. I was just about to say that. I think Devin Bush benefits greatly with the addition of Brian Flores, just because the Steelers tried to use him as the inside linebacker. And I just don't think that the Pittsburgh Steelers defense is built for the inside linebacker. Like they need specific, like trait specific inside linebackers. And Devin Bush is a dude who can be very athletic on the line of scrimmage, come rush the quarterback. When he's not afraid to hit somebody, he's a really good run defending inside linebacker. Like he fits that mold. And I think you need to use him in different ways to just have him stand back there. Plus it messed with his confidence was terrible to begin with. But when you looked at Devin Bush throughout the season, there were a couple of times where you're like, this dude just feels like he's just sitting around waiting to get hit. And if you move him, he's not sitting around waiting to get hit anymore. He's making things happen. I think that could change a lot for Devin Bush. First round pick here. Even if it means trading up, we said we're not talking about trading up, but we'll toss it out here for this one. Who's your first round pick for the Steelers?
If we're talking about want,
want. Keyword.
It's Andrew Booth from Clemson for me. I wrote an article earlier this week, one that I'd been holding off writing just because I was, trying to let the process play out. But for me, I'm big on Andrew Booth, man. I think if he was allowed to test and wasn't dealing with his injuries during the pre-draft process, that he would be going like top 10. I'm firmly a believer in that. What makes Booth's fit in Pittsburgh so intriguing, though, is like they're going to play a lot of zone defense next year because I don't think they have the personnel on the boundary to play man. But Booth played in a really zone-heavy scheme in Clemson. He's a guy that's an extremely freaky, reactive athlete. Pittsburgh requires their cornerbacks to play the run very well, and that's something that Booth does an excellent job of. Coming downhill, reading, crack, replace, just being aggressive in that aspect of the game. So I think he's my favorite. And like also, if the Steelers want to move to a more man-heavy scheme, I think Booth's an even better fit there. So I'm bullish on Booth as far as like an NFL prospect. He is. I mean, he played in a zone-heavy scheme at Clemson, Alex. But I think if you look at his man-to-man reps, like you can tell just with his athleticism and really his footwork, that's what sets Booth apart from like your average first-round cornerback. I don't want to say like generational because I feel like we use that word too much, but like he is elite footwork for a corner. His ability to use his feet and stay in his pedal without like declaring and opening up his hips too early, like it's teach tape stuff. So like he's a guy that can play in press, he can play in off coverage. He really can do whatever it is you want your corners to do. And like I don't use NFL comparisons very often just because I always feel like they just don't make a ton of sense. But one that came to my mind when I was watching Booth is like Trey White. Trey White's his own corner. He plays in Buffalo. But they can do a lot of the same things. They play exactly the same. If you watch Trey White in press coverage when he's playing man-to-man and you watch Andrew Booth, it looks exactly the same stance, the same footwork, the same motor technique, mirror. I mean, it's really good stuff. And I'm really, really confident that he's going to be a very good NFL player.
Yeah, Booth is a dude you've turned me on to a long time ago. I feel really good about him. Just want to address this real quick. Hey, this is what we're here to break rules. Okay. So you want us to break rules. You tell us to break rules. We'll go do it for you. Always. We appreciate you. My guy is on the offensive side of the ball. And just to keep it somewhat realistic, it would be Jameson Williams. I think that the Pittsburgh Steelers, I love Deontay Johnson, and I think he is a wide receiver one. I'm a little eerie still on Chase Claypool, but I think that Jameson Williams is a dude that if he didn't tear his ACL and wasn't going through this rehab process would be a lock for wide receiver one. And I think he just has that type of talent. It's a new day and age. ACLs are not career ending. Chances are he's going to come back better than he was before the injury. And that's just a dude that no matter how the Steelers quarterback direction goes for the next 3 or 4 years, he's a dude that makes it that much better. If you have Mitchell Trubisky in there, people say all the time, like, oh, well, he ruined Allen Robinson. Like, yeah, he did, but Allen Robinson also like did a lot to make Mitchell Trubisky as best as he can possibly play. And I think that no matter who's out there right now, the Pittsburgh Steelers don't have like that guy. There were times where Landry Jones was on the field and like you could tell he was just terrible. And Antonio Brown, even though he wasn't having 10 catches a game, was still having 5 and like turning them into something. And I think that Jameson Williams is a guy that you just put out there. You feel confident in him all the time. He's a generational talent at wide receiver, in my opinion.
Yeah. At least from a speed perspective. I mean,
at least from a speed perspective.
That dude, I mean, there's players that are fast at the receiver position, and then there's like guys like Jameson Williams. I mean, Williams is just an absolutely ridiculous athlete who really dictates the way defenses have to play him. I mean, if you're going to give him a free release off the line of scrimmage, it's game over. And like a lot of the times, like you saw Alabama, like there's been that clip that's been rolling around Twitter the last couple of weeks where they'll put Williams in the slot to get him away from press coverage and just send him up the field. And if he gets even on you, he's leaving. So it's over. Like at that point, it's over. Like all you got to do is just throw it up because there's nobody in a secondary, even at the NFL level, there's only going to be a handful of players that can run with Jameson Williams step for step, stride for stride.
That's what I'm saying.
And that's why I said like he's a player that dictates the way that defenses will have to play you because you're not going to be able to just throw any regular starting corner out there on him. Now, granted, like the one thing with Williams that I will say, like he has to improve at early on, it could be a struggle, is just against press coverage because he's taller, like he is like 6'1", but he's really thin. He's got that lean frame, so he does struggle. Like when guys, like when I noticed when corners were able to get their hands on his chest, like it kind of knocked him off balance a little bit. So he's gonna have to learn how to play through contact and like beat press coverage. But you can hide him early on. Like you can put him in the slot, you can put him at the Z, motion him away from press, and get him those free releases, and he's still going to be able to have a big impact.
Yeah, and he'll put on weight. The NFL bulks you up, and it bulks you up very quick. So I'm not that those things are never a big concern for me.
I want to get to Tyler asked a question on Twitter. I see that he's in the chat now. I wanted to go ahead and answer that.
Oh, yes, he did. Are you pulling it up?
Yeah, I'm pulling it up right now. Let's see. Jesus Christ. Where is it?
All right, I got it right here. Everyone has, I can't pull it up on the screen, but everyone has their guys they are looking for in round one. But who is one or a couple prospects you're looking for in round two?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And the name that immediately popped to my head when I saw Tyler tweet that was Jaquan Brisker from Penn State. You look at a guy, like obviously the Steelers have a huge need right now, a strong safety. Brisker's been a guy that can really, really play at that strong safety position. He's a really good cover man. The thing that I think makes him so intriguing is like he's capable of playing in the box. He can play split safety. He has a little bit of experience playing deep. Really good athlete. The Steelers love like really athletic profiles at the safety position. The thing that I like about Brisker is just how freaking strong he is and like physical. And like normally when you think about guys at that strong safety position that are physical, you're thinking like, oh, he's a limited athlete. Like Brisker's a freak athlete too. So like he's a very good he's fast, but like I can see him being a matchup piece at the next level to kind of combat some of these like bigger tight ends or bigger slot receivers. You can put Brisker on him and he's not going to be able to be moved at the break point of routes, and big guys aren't just going to be able to shrug him off. Like he's going to be able to hold up. I thought it was interesting at his combine media session when we were there in Indianapolis. He mentioned that, he couldn't even lift with the rest of the Penn State DBs. He had to lift because they just couldn't lift with him. I think he put up like 26 reps, correct me if I'm wrong, on the bench press, but you can see it on his tape. Like he's just not easily moved. And I think the tackling issues that he had last year were really more of a result of like him playing through that banged up shoulder than anything else. So I like Brisker. I think if he's there at 52, he's going to be in strong consideration, especially with the Steelers sending their DB coach, Grady Brown, to see his pro day. I think that bodes well for both him and like Tariq Castro-Fields, maybe later in the draft, the corner. So that's the guy that I think on day two that I'm looking at on defense to say like that could be the guy.
Why hasn't Brisker been in the conversation with Dax and Lewis and Kyle Hamilton's in a class of his own, but those like second tier one guys, why is Brisker seem to just follow that?
For me, I think you're seeing more of these safeties that are playing in the slot nowadays. Like it used to always be a corner there. And like now safety is kind of becoming more prevalent, and it helps you again in run defense. What makes Daxton more valuable, in my opinion, is just like with the length and the way that he moves and his cover skills. I think you could honestly put him at corner, like on the boundary, and he can play. So he's a little bit more versatile, in my opinion. As far as Lewis Seen's just an unbelievable athlete. I mean, like the way that he moves. I mean, Brisker's a really good athlete too, but I think Seen, like his athleticism in terms of just running straight downhill is going to be extremely appealing to teams. I don't know. I could see teams leaning a certain way and maybe having Brisker in that conversation. But like I said, I really think that Brisker would have had a more impressive year last year, and a little bit better tape or cleaner tape, if he was able to play pain-free and not dealing with that shoulder injury.
Yeah, I agree with that one. I think that did hurt his draft stock. He's just a surprise to me because every time I watch him, impressed by him. And then you talk about, and I get, like we've talked about this before, 5 safeties aren't going to go in the first round, so they do get spread out a little bit. But it just seems as if he's not even in the conversation, and it's always surprised me. So my guy is on the other side of the ball, and just to keep it realistic again, I think it's George Pickens. I'm real into the wide receivers this season. I think every year there's loads of wide receivers, but I think this year there's some true talent. George Pickens is a dude who people are talking, oh, he might slide into the bottom of the first round. In my opinion, if he makes it to 52 and you could just sit there, that's a steal. Because that's a guy that could come in. You've explained this before. He could play X. He could play pretty much all over the field, anywhere you need him to be. He is that true third guy for the Pittsburgh Steelers that just makes all the sense in the world. There's another question here from Tyler about whether or not we'd be surprised if the wide receiver wasn't taken in the first 3 rounds. Yeah, very, very surprised. I think that if they don't take one in the second, it would have to be because there's a true best player available that they're really in love with.
Yeah, I also agree with that. I think they're going to take a receiver on day 2. And it really wouldn't surprise me. I mean, they need one. It's a need. They need a starting receiver. You know, you have Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, but you need that third receiver who's a starter now in today's NFL with how much 11 personnel we see. And just going back to Brisker, like another thing that I think that he could stand to work on at the next level because he is a really good athlete. I think transitions can be a little bit of a problem sometimes with him. Like he's not as fluid flipping his hips as you'd like to see, but there are flashes where it's good. He can just be a little bit high in my opinion, but I like Pickens as well. I mean, he's another good answer. If he's there at 52, like that's incredible value in my opinion. It would be a tough decision for me personally on who I'd pick between Pickens or Brisker at that point.
I was going to say, if they're both on the board, who are you taking? Are you taking Brisker? I would go Brisker.
Yeah, they're both really good players. I think if you wait until round 3, the receiver class is deep to where you can get contributors. I'm not really sure who they would go with based on who's going to be there. I mean, there's guys maybe like John Mechie, who played a lot of slot at Alabama. You look at guys like maybe Justin Ross at Clemson. You know, he's played on the boundary primarily, but a bigger receiver, 6'4", dealt with a lot of injuries, bad quarterback play last year, bad offense. And then maybe another guy, I don't know, it feels early for him, but like we said the same thing about when they took Deontay Johnson at like 66 a couple years ago. Maybe a guy like Danny Gray from SMU. Them sending the receivers coach. Normally, if your position coach goes to your pro day, that's a good indicator that there's a significant amount of interest. And they went to see Gray and Ross and Pickens. So those are guys that I'm definitely looking for on day 2 as far as like who's going to be putting on a Steelers uniform. Those are names that I'd have circled.
What about Johan Dodson at 20? Too early. I believe it's too early.
Yeah, that's a little early for me. I think Dodson's a good player. He's really unique though, because while I am excited about seeing his transition to the league, he's just a very unique player because like he doesn't have great size, but he just plays extremely well above the rim. I mean, it's not normal that you see a 5'11" guy be able to go high point the football and go make plays in the air like he does. He's pretty well rounded as far as like, there's some good route running reps. I think some of his route running needs to get a little sharper, but I do like Dodson as far as like just being a really well rounded receiver. I just don't know if I'm taking a receiver in round 1, I want the potential for him to be like a wide receiver 1. And I don't see that with Dodson. I see Dodson as a wide receiver 3, like maybe in like year 1, year 2, but like could definitely be a wide receiver 2 in the future. So that's why I think 20 is a little rich for my blood.
Yeah, me too. And I think that he will go before 52. And I think that's like the perfect place for him is early second round somewhere because he does have a lot of talent and this dude can do a lot of things and he plays much bigger than he says or than he looks. So I think he is going to make an impact on the team in year 1, but just like you said, he doesn't bring wide receiver 1, not in year 1. 20, there's a lot of talent on the board here. Let's go to Aiden's question here on Joe Hayden. Do you think he can come back on a discount price? Before you answer that, what would be a discount price for Joe Hayden? You got to remember, this is swag you. Okay. This dude has a driver to practice. I love Joe Hayden. I think he's an excellent human being, but he's got a driver to practice. He is always decked out in the finest gear. Always. I remember Ray McLeod said one time, we asked him, somebody asked a dumb question about his swag or something. And he was like, he's like, Joe Hayden's got rich people money. And I was like, oh, okay. I get that. I knew exactly what he meant. So what is a discount for Joe Hayden?
Yeah. So I don't think Joe Hayden's going to come back. I don't think there's really any interest from the Steelers. And I don't know that there would be interest from Joe's perspective either. Joe's at that age, man, where like, I think he's going to want to go to a contender, primarily a team that plays a lot of zone coverage. I love the fit for Buffalo if he does decide to go that route, because Buffalo, plays a lot of zone defense. But I think that the signing of Levi Wallace, like a lot of the things that Wallace does is what Joe does really well. So like, I think they're very similar players in terms of just like the things that they can do. They're both zone coverage corners. Good tacklers, willing to play like trap, and they can play trail, but they're not guys that you want in man-to-man coverage. Joe's just lost like a step and a half. And I really think that that's, a reason why, like for me, I don't know what the discount would be. And I don't want it to be like disrespectful to him either. Like a guy who's made like 9 to 10 million. I mean, he's made a ton of money
A ton
over his
of
career.
money.
Like in Cleveland, he signed that massive deal before he like got released a couple years into it. He's been in Pittsburgh for like 5 years. And I think all of those have been, $8 to $10 million a year contracts. I mean, I don't know what he's looking for, but it's just really not something that I'm interested in. I loved having Joe here in Pittsburgh. Like it was fun to watch him, especially a guy that I watched, when I was younger in college at Florida. But I don't see the fit anymore, really, unfortunately.
No, I think Joe's moving on, and I like your thought on a contender. I think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers could also be an answer for him, a team that doesn't necessarily like need a true starter, but could occupy Joe quite well, still pay him a decent amount of money. I hope he does find a contract somewhere. Like I said, Joe's one of the nicest people I've ever met, ever. And I think that he's still got enough in it to, play somewhere. Well, will that be Pittsburgh? No. And I think the NFL draft will be because of that. They have Levi Wallace. They have Ahkello Witherspoon. They have Cam Sutton. They have Arthur Millette. They don't need, somebody to play a lot. They just need somebody to fill in. So, good.
My thoughts on the corner position is like they're either going to take a guy in the draft that maybe they can develop down the road, because they don't really have like long-term answers at corners. Wallace and Witherspoon both signed 2-year deals, but like there's an easy out after one. Cam Sutton, same situation. He's on a shorter term deal now. I don't know what their plan is for that position, but I don't see really the best course of action would either be upgrade, which means you need to take like an Andrew Booth or something like that in like round 1. Or we could see them take like a day 3 or a later round pick and try to develop those guys, like maybe in a reserve role this year to maybe step into a starter role next year. So
that's a good thing, because I did want to ask you about this. What are some options later in the draft in defensive backfield, primarily a corner, I guess, that the Steelers could find that can actually make an impact?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different guys that I've watched tape on. The one guy that sticks out to me as far as that I really like is Jalen Armour-Davis. He's a guy that really needs to work on his technique. He's a little sloppy with his footwork, really raw. But when you watch him on tape, I mean, the athleticism really pops. I mean, he's a sudden athlete. He's explosive. The recovery speed, straight line speed is all there. And he's got the NFL body to play on the boundary. He really only has 1 year of tape because he dealt with some injuries at Bama, and then he decided to come out early. But I thought he was their best corner last year, and I was really intrigued by his film. So he's a kind of a day 3 guy that I'd be intrigued by. I would honestly take him maybe even as early as like round 3, where the Steelers pick.
What?
Yeah, I'm pretty bullish on the upside. I think that he can play and be like a starting corner with like a year of seasoning with the right DB coach.
Okay.
But one thing I will say though, I like him a lot more in man. So if you're planning on playing a whole lot of zone, like he's a little bit raw in his technique, and he's still not really there as like a zone processor, like processing route concepts like behind him. That's not his strength yet. Other guys like maybe Joshua Williams from Fayetteville State. He like people talk about Sauce Gardner being kind of the builder corner, if you will. Josh Williams kind of in that same mold. I mean, he's like 6'2". He scored a 10 RAS. Just looking at his like card right now, freaking ridiculous. 195 pounds, ran a 4.53 40, but a 1.5 split. That's like a unreal time.
Yeah.
Somebody of that size. And there's even other like corners that I really like on day 3, like Jacoby Durant. He's a guy that I mocked to the Steelers. He had a really big game against Clemson, 2 interceptions this year. It's a good corner class, man. I think there's guys on day 3 with upside to be starters, and that's really not usually the case. It has been the last couple of years, but it's really rare that I feel like I'm not confident, but like I could see 6 or 7 guys being starters at the next level. Another guy that even Andrew Booth's teammate, Mario Goodrich, I think.
That's a guy I forget. So every time we talk about this, I'm like, I think to mention him. I can't get words out right now. I think to mention him, and then I don't. And then I think about him at some point throughout the day. And I'm like, oh, this is a dude. Andrew Booth took a lot of attention because of how good Andrew Booth is, but he contains a lot of pro skills that I think he's very unfined, but he's a dude that you could bring in and say you could work with. He reminds me a little bit of Justin Lane, which stinks. It's a terrible comparison, but he's a dude who you just look at and go, he could be a pro.
The thing that I like about Goodrich, and like obviously I've already mentioned, the way that Booth plays the run and the way he can diagnose stuff and fly up the alley. But like Goodrich is the same kind of guy. Like he plays the run really well. He's a solid tackler. He's just really willing to put his face in the fan. And like you look at what Pittsburgh typically looks at for the corner position, you have to tackle. If you're going to be a zone defense or you're going to play corner in Pittsburgh, like you have to tackle. So Goodrich does have some things to work on, but I think like as a day 3 corner, pretty good chance I think that he would make the roster, and somebody that maybe could slide into one of those corner positions if you didn't want to retain Wallace or Witherspoon after this year. Maybe he could slide in there along with the draft pick next year. But I like Goodrich a lot as far as like a day 3 guy.
All right, so let's transition over to the offense here. There's 2 questions here about the quarterbacks. Do you believe that the loss of Dwayne Haskins adds pressure to the Steelers quarterback situation? And just to kind of piggyback off of that one, Ronald way earlier in the chat asked for a sleeper at quarterback later in the draft. He says Cole Kelly.
Okay. The first question, as sad of a situation as the Dwayne Haskins tragedy is, don't really think that really impacts the Steelers' plans. We've talked about it for the last couple of months. Steelers are, in our opinion, they're going to take a quarterback in round 1 probably, or they're going to take one really early. I don't know that Haskins really played much into that thought process. I just think that the Steelers really want one, and they're going to get one. As far as the next question was, Cole Kelly is really interesting. He's a name that I watched a little bit last year. A guy that I think could be a sleeper and may go a little bit earlier than expected is EJ Perry from Brown.
He visited with the Browns yesterday, correct?
Yeah, he's actually had a couple visits. He's really interesting. He's a pretty good athlete for he's a pretty good athlete for his size. Really accurate underneath. I noticed a couple off-script plays where he was rolling out of the pocket and was able to throw touch passes like down the sideline, good accuracy. I'm not sure that he's ever going to be more than a backup, but like when you're talking about day 3 quarterbacks, I think he has a chance to make a roster. So if you're looking for like a sleeper in that regard, I think the other well-known guys that are going to probably go on day 3, like Bailey Zappi, incredibly productive through like 60
I was going to ask about him.
pounds or something like that
at
Western. I think, chance to be a backup. Maybe Caleb Ellaby played in a really RPO system in college. I think he has a role as a backup quarterback in the league as well. So I think those guys are all guys that could make rosters next year.
I like Zappi. I like Ellaby. I said that name wrong, but I apologize. I think both of them have the athleticism to actually be a quality Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback as a backup. The problem with the Steelers is, and this is my thought, just to address the first one, is I think the Steelers do add another quarterback because they said they'll bring 4 quarterbacks into the summer, and I think they're going to stick with that. Again, a tragic, terribly heartbreaking loss for Dwayne Haskins, and I still think all of Steelers Nation's feeling that. But I think it's a veteran. I think it's a younger veteran. A name to keep an eye out for, as crazy as this sounds, is Josh Rosen. Dude's still very young. At worst, if you bring Mason Rudolph and Mitchell Trubisky and a rookie into the offseason, you're getting rid of one of those 3. Chances are it's Mason Rudolph, but you're not going to keep all 3 on the roster for the whole season. You're going to carry 2 quarterbacks into the season. You're probably going to trade Mason Rudolph or cut him or whatever. And then you want a practice squad guy. I think Josh Rosen, nice catch, fills that very well, where he's an option to come in, be a practice squad guy. He's athletic enough to kind of imitate any quarterback you need to. And, there's not really high expectations. At the same time, he's young and he can kind of push these guys. There's a couple other names. Geno Smith was a name I thought could have fit kind of well in that situation, but obviously he re-signed with the Seahawks. But I think that's how they go with their 4th quarterback there.
Yeah, I personally think it's going to be a first-round draft pick, and then they'll probably roll with that guy, whether it's Malik Willis or Desmond Ritter, whoever. Trubisky, Rudolph is a little bit of a question mark. Would they keep all 3 of those? Like, would they keep Rudolph if they have Trubisky? I don't know. And then you're probably looking at like an undrafted free agent for that 4th spot, in my opinion. Like, I don't think that because I think Perry's going to get drafted. Zappy's going to get drafted. Cole Kelly, I'm not sure if he's going to get drafted because he didn't get a combine invite. But, speaking of Bailey Zappi, though, I wanted to bring this up. One of the guys we talked earlier in the show, for the people that weren't in here at the beginning, we talked about pass rushers, just not really – maybe that's not the biggest need next year, assuming you get to it and Alu back. But, like, 2 years from now, it looks like a pretty big need when you just look at their roster and just kind of the ages of Cam Hayward, contracts of other guys. D'Angelo Malone from Western Kentucky, I'm glad that somebody brought up Zappi to make me remember that. But he's a guy that I really like as far as like a day 3 pass rusher that has a lot of tools. He's like 6'4", 240. Honestly, one of the best benders in the class when it comes to like bending around contact. He's a strictly speed pass rusher who, he's it's exclusively speed. I mean, there's no power behind his hands yet at all. He's really still developing that, but really highly productive in college. I think he had like 32.5 sacks. As a 5th-year senior last year, he used his COVID year, had 8 sacks, but he forced 4 fumbles. So you like to see like that type of turnover production from your edge rusher. So he's a guy that I think, as a developmental guy to take late in the draft, he could make a lot of sense. Brandon Hunt was at the Western Kentucky Pro Day. Obviously, Zappi's probably the most known name. They also have a slot receiver, Jared Stearns, who caught for almost 2,000 yards last year, which is absurd. Only 5'9", exclusively a slot receiver, but extremely productive and maybe a guy that, didn't get a combine invite, so I'm not sure if he gets drafted or not, but maybe that's a guy they look at as far as an undrafted free agent.
So
Will Anderson, TJ Watt.
Any day, any single day. Won't happen, unfortunately. All right, let's finish it off here with we knew it was going to happen. We knew we were going to get one of them. Excited to get one of them because we're getting close. And we'll have to go. We could go. I thought about this the other day. After this offseason, maybe after next offseason. We might never talk about a quarterback again in Pittsburgh for like the next 10 years. So
I hope so.
Everybody's complaining, but like this is where it's at. But after this, we're talking about defensive tackles and how bad Chase Claypool is or isn't. So enjoy it while it lasts. All right, we'll finish it off here. Desmond Ritter, first round, pick 20. We're not saying they move at all. We're saying pick 20. We'll even say in this situation, Kenny Pickett and Malik Willis are already gone because I believe I believe they'd pick Desmond Ritter over Kenny Pickett, but I think that's a whole other conversation. Desmond Ritter at 20, is it a reach? Are you feeling good enough?
Yes, it's a reach in that they probably shouldn't do it, but it's not the worst case scenario. And I'll clarify that by saying, like, I think Ritter has two traits that I absolutely love for a quarterback, and I think he's probably the smartest quarterback in this class in terms of like just identifying defenses pre-snap and knowing where his head should be post-snap. And I love the aggressiveness. Like when teams blitzed him, he got super aggressive and pushed the ball down the field. I think that is also a really good trait because as a young quarterback in the league, defensive coordinators are going to try to get you rattled. They're going to bring the house. You have to have the answers very quickly because you got to understand, like, you'll see things pre-snap and they will change post-snap and you have 2.5 seconds to get the ball out. So you have to have a quick processor. And I think for the most part, Desmond really does that. He's athletic, has a good arm. I wouldn't say great arm strength, but a good arm. I really still see – I know everyone that he's compared himself to Ryan Tannehill. I do think that there are some Tannehill-ish vibes from Ritter. A guy that would thrive, in terms of like go and play action. He can play under center. So I don't think it's the worst case scenario. Now, do I think that they should pick him over like – I'm not going to mention Booth's name again, but like do I think they should pick him over like – better players just to get a quarterback? No, I don't. But like I could totally see them doing that. But I think people will love Ritter in Pittsburgh after he's selected, if that's the case, because he's a winner. Like he made a lot of clutch plays down the stretch. Like you look at what he did to Notre Dame. We've talked about this game on the podcast before, but like just I think his attitude and he has the right approach of what you want in a rookie quarterback. Like they asked him about the interview before the Notre Dame game. They asked him about the crowd noise, and he looked at the reporter and he was like, I told my offensive coordinator it won't be loud for too long. Like he has the right swagger. He has the right confidence for the position. And that's very important. I've stressed this a lot this offseason, but that's very important. Your quarterback has to be the most confident / cocky person on your team. And I think that Ritter really has that trait. Do I see him as like a top 10 guy in the league? I personally don't think he gets there, but I think he could be a good start. I think he could be a pretty good starting quarterback.
My only worry, and I want your opinion on this, is that he turns into a quarterback similar to Jalen Hurts, where his efficiency is running the football and not throwing the football. Lamar Jackson's a bad example because I think Lamar could throw the football if he had anybody to throw the football to. Mm-hmm. Is that a justified worry that Desmond Ritter could turn, especially in a Matt Canada style offense where, like, as of what we know right now, it's quick passes and letting people do their thing? Well, Desmond Ritter is going to want to do his thing. Is it a worry that'll turn into a runner?
I was worried about that with Hurts because when I watched him in college, that man could not process for any specific reason. I mean, like him trying to process stuff was just very slow, in my opinion. So that was my worry with Hurts, was because he often turned down open receivers in order to scramble. I don't have that same worry with Ritter. Ritter wants to be a pocket passer. Like, despite being really athletic and he really can be like a really fast straight line runner, he wants to throw from the pocket. And I want that as a quarterback. I mean, that's a good trait to have. People can get it done in different ways, but I think that that's not really a concern of mine. The biggest concern for me is the accuracy. Like Ritter's just flat out not accurate enough. And like a lot of that stems from his mechanics. He oftentimes throws from like a wide base where either locks out his front leg, or he just doesn't have proper weight distribution. So those things worry me. And they especially worry me because I've watched Ritter for 4 years now, and I really studied him last summer. Even when he went back to school. And I thought his mechanics got better this year, but his accuracy really didn't. So, like, that's a concern for me when the accuracy is still not there as a senior. It's definitely a worry because, I mean, not everybody's Josh Allen. I mean, that's the exception to the rule, not the rule itself in terms of like fixing accuracy problems. But you look at, I mean, like I said, Ritter's got a lot of intangible qualities in my opinion, and like you can't turn your nose up at a guy that led Cincinnati, who's not a powerhouse blue blood program. He went like 44-4. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, they had a lot of big wins. I mean, he led them to bowl games against Georgia and Alabama. Of course, they didn't win those games, but it's not like he looked like he didn't belong either. So
that's what I'm saying. He put up a fight against Bama, and that spoke a lot. All right, we got one more. Let me ask this though. Let's ask this one, then we'll finish off with that one. Willis, whether we trade up or sit back at 20 and get him, does he fit into Matt Canada's offense, what we know of Matt Canada's offense so far?
I'm not really sure what that is, to be honest. People keep telling me Canada, like he's ran so many different, like if you look at like his offense when he was at NC State, it's different from when it was from what it was when he was at Pitt.
Yeah.
So like, and then you look at LSU and that was like a total disaster, but like completely different from what it was at Pitt too. So I don't know. I mean, their offense changed last year under Canada, from the previous year, but I don't know what it's going to look like. I do think that he wants to get under center more, maybe. And Willis didn't do a ton of that in college, but like he showed at the Senior Bowl that he could do that. I think that if you're taking Willis and you're not going to let him run, or you're going to tell him like, hey, don't run, or you're not going to design runs, especially on like third and short, third and like medium. Tomlin actually talked about this last year, but like when you get into those third and short situations, that's where having a running quarterback is really advantageous for your offense because it gives the defense one more guy that they have to account for. And not only is it one more guy that they have to account for, you got to think like quarterback runs, you have an additional blocker because you're using like your halfback as a blocker. So there is that aspect of it. I do think if you're going to take Willis, you need to just let him be him. Like you need to develop him as a passer because he's got a long way to go in terms of like reading defenses. In my opinion, the mechanics have gotten a little bit better, but you absolutely have to let him run. Like as even say he sits next year and plays the year after, I think the absolute floor for Malik is like 700-800 rushing yards if he stays healthy. I mean, there's no reason that it should be less than that. Like really, you just got to let him be him. I mean, he's a really good athlete. You got to let him use his skill set to the best of his ability.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know just to touch on the beginning, I don't know. All we've learned about Matt Canada's offenses, and like, I feel like I'm throwing some shade at like the media around me and I don't mean to, but is we've learned that he wants to run some play action. Didn't see much of it. He wants to be under center and he wants to move guys around a lot pre-snap. Besides that, I couldn't tell you. And we didn't do much of any of that. So I couldn't tell you at all what to expect from Matt Canada's offense. I think whatever quarterback is here, it gets built to them. And I think that's the important part. You can't build an offense to your offensive coordinator. Your offensive coordinator has to build an offense to your quarterback. That's the difference.
And that's not specific to the Steelers either. That is common sense football 101. I mean, and that's something that I didn't think the Steelers did a very good job about that last year. I'm not going to get into that whole rant, but if your offensive coordinator isn't doing things to the strengths of your quarterback, you need to get into offensive coordinator. So like that, to me, in terms of like, for one, we don't know if Canada's going to be around much longer. I mean, he had a really bad offense last year. We'll see how it looks this year with Trubisky. But, like, we don't know if he's going to be the coordinator for Malik or whoever they draft in the short term or a long term. So you don't draft somebody for Canada's offense or, like, try to fit them into Canada's offense. Canada is responsible for making an offense advantageous for that quarterback. And that's really what the focus should be moving forward.
Yep, there were a lot of comments last year about how, Ben's not adjusting to the offense. Well, maybe the offense should adjust to your Hall of Fame quarterback.
We're not going
usually that way. All right, we're about to head out. I want, real quick before we leave, who right now, we are less than 2 weeks away from the NFL draft, is your first round pick for the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Mm.
Oh, we're not prepared. I thought you would be prepared.
I'm still gonna go with Ritter. I think they really want Willis, but I just don't know if they're gonna be willing to pay the cost to go get him. I will say this: if Willis gets past Carolina, then I want to switch my pick because I think they'll move up to get him. I just don't know. I don't know what Carolina's going to do. Rule is desperate to save his job. They should 100% take Charles Cross. I don't understand any mock draft that doesn't have them taking Charles Cross. I don't get it. But they might take Kenny Pickett. They might take Malik Willis. I've even seen some people saying that Matt Corral might be in the discussion. I think that's absolutely.
I have seen that. That is crazy.
But if he gets past Carolina, you start looking at the teams that could potentially, like Atlanta's another team that who knows what they're going to do. But Atlanta, they need help everywhere. They could pick anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I think if he got past Carolina, I think the Steelers would be really on the phones in order to move up from Malik. But I just think Ritter, I have a good amount of confidence that he's going to probably be there at 20. So I'm gonna say that that's probably my pick.
Yeah, I feel the exact same way. Desmond Ritter is my pick at 20. I don't think it's 6. I think if he slides past 9, I think if he gets past the Seahawks, then the Pittsburgh Steelers start calling because I think they could grab him at 13, I believe 12 with the Minnesota Vikings. I think that's a good place for him. And they might not have to give up too much, but that's a wait and see type situation, draft night type stuff.
Are we gonna drop the?
We didn't drop the thing. All right, so before we head out here, if you have not checked our community page on our YouTube, we'll drop it on Twitter. We'll share it on Facebook, pretty much everywhere. Me and Derek, along with some very special guests that we will announce at a later date, will be hosting a live NFL draft special 4 hours before the first pick in the 2022 NFL draft. We'll be jumping on YouTube right at youtube.com/allsteelerstalk from 4 to 8 p.m. here, chatting with you guys, chatting with some guests, maybe a former Pittsburgh Steelers Super Bowl champion. And on top of all that, we got plenty and plenty of giveaways, some signed jerseys, Manscaped's tossing us some stuff to give away to all of you guys. So we are very excited. We can't wait to join you guys, talk some NFL draft for 4 hours before the NFL draft, and then send everybody in to draft night until 1 a.m. when we hear Desmond Ritter's name called with that first pick.
And look, I see all these names on a weekly basis, so I'm expecting every single one of you guys in here. We're throwing a 4-hour pre-draft show, a 4-hour, okay? All you got to do is be in here. We're going to give a ton of stuff away. We're going to give away some jerseys, some Manscaped products. I might even go cop some other stuff. So make sure you're in here. Obviously, if you're not already, subscribe to the channel. Subscribe. But yeah, we're super excited. The guests and stuff will be out. Y'all will know who's coming on. A lot of people that you guys probably already listened to. We're really excited about it. It's something that we've had in the works for several weeks now. We've done a lot of work on. So I'm excited about it. 2 weeks away, less than 2 weeks away now. So just make sure y'all tap in, hit the like button, set your alarms, whatever you got to do.
Yes, sir.
But yeah, I'm so hyped about it. We're jacked up over here.
We are very jacked up. It's going to be very exciting. We'll talk a little bit more. Hopefully we have a final guest list for you guys next Friday, so we could release that as well. In the meantime, make sure that you're hitting the like button, you're hitting the subscribe button, you're sharing this to all your friends using our promo code at manscaped.com for 20% off, plus free shipping. Remember that we have a post in our community page as well for you to drop your mock drafts. We'll check them out next week. Throughout the week, we'll be giving away some terrible towels to ones that we think best fit the Pittsburgh Steelers. So make sure that you do that. We appreciate you. Thank you for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk. We'll be back next week. Enjoy your weekend. Peace.